Good morning. So we've done this every meeting, and I want to do it hopefully one final time. We do have a few faces around here, so I'd like to go around the room and just have you introduce yourselves again, and in particular what agency or organization you're representing, because that will become something we're going to be talking about here in a little bit. So I'll start this off. I'm Greg Dale. With McBride Dale Clarion. My role has been to help facilitate this process. Can't hear? Okay. I don't know. Now it's on. Do I have to say all that again? No. Okay, we're going to do introductions. Let's start here with Mike.
Good morning, Mike Madison, Planning Director of Williamson County.
Good morning, Roger Anderson, Williamson County Mayor. Jeff Mosley, Williamson County Attorney.
Sarah Toddy, I'm actually the city engineer at Fairview. We're here because our planning director's gone, so it's our city manager as well.
Tom Doherty, City Manager, Fairview.
Hello, I'm Lisa Anderson. I'm the current mayor of Fairview, Tennessee.
Pam Caskey, City of Spring Hill.
Morning, Jim Hageman, Mayor, Spring Hill.
Bob Graham, Greenbelt Representative. Brett Schultz, Town of Nolensville Planning Director. Good morning, everybody.
Vernon Gross, Assistant City Administrator, City of Franklin.
Victor Lay, Town Manager, Nolensville.
Eric Stuckey, Franklin City Administrator.
Kelly Dannenfelser, City of Franklin, Assistant Director of Planning.
Good morning, Andrew Orr, City of Franklin, Planning.
Emily Wright, City of Franklin, Planning Director.
Bob Lehman, City of Brentwood, Planning Director.
Kirk Badnar, City Manager, Brentwood.
Kristen Corrin, City of Brentwood, City Attorney.
Shauna Billingsley, City of Franklin City Attorney.
Brian Stover, Mayor of Thompson Station. Michael Wood, I'm the Planning Director for Thompson Station.
Andrew Mills, Town Attorney for Thompson Station.
Chaz Morton, County Commissioner, 9th District.
Judy Herbert, County Commissioner, 2nd District.
Jason Golden, Director of Schools for Williamson County Schools.
Joe Horn, Community Development Director of Williamson County Government.
And I'm Christy Ransom. I'm the County Attorney for Planning and Environment.
Great. So at our last meeting, we made a commitment to you that we were not going to bring you back out to talk about maps again. You all have seen the proposed growth boundary map many times now, multiple meetings. You will recall that there was one small issue remaining to be resolved, and that issue has been resolved. So we think we are at a point now where we can stop talking about maps. I want to thank Spring Hill and Thompson Station for keeping their head down over the last month or so and working out that final issue. We now have a map that has been reviewed by the planners group, the informal planners group that meets basically as frequently as you all have been meeting, and we think we're there. So the second item on the agenda there we think is a very quick item. So what we committed to you last time is that when we got together again, we would be prepared to present you with what we've loosely been calling a game plan, which is a guide to how we proceed from here. And that is going to be what we spend most of our time here, almost all our time here this morning. The only other issue we wanted to update you on, you will recall the discussion at the last meeting about the pending legislation at the state legislature in terms of potential changes to the growth planning, growth boundary law. That has now been pushed at least for a year, so that's off the table now for our purposes. So we think we're down really to talking about how we go forward from here. Spoiler alert here, we hope that this is the last meeting of this advisory group acting in its unofficial advisory capacity. So we hope that if there are any other issues or questions that haven't been brought out, that they are brought out, because I think we're ready to move forward. I think our sense, I think your sense is probably let's get some momentum back in this process and knock this out. So if I don't see any hands or comments or questions or objections, what we're going to do now is to present you with that process and a potential schedule. We have copies of a handout that we will give you at the end of this. But what we're going to do first of all is have Christy go through those steps that are needed to be taken. And as part of that, the process that creates the formal coordinating committee and what agencies are represented and so forth. You will recall that when we started this process, this advisory group was set up with the idea that at the appropriate time, it could transition into the coordinating committee. So all of the agencies that are required to be represented and all the designees of that coordinating committee are essentially here in one form or another. So we can talk about that process as well. So without any further ado, I'm going to ask Christy to come up and walk you through that. Okay? Good.
Do you have the clicker?
Right there.
Oh, okay. We'll see if I can use it. There we go. All right. Well, good morning. Let me first just address that legislative stuff that we were dealing with. Last meeting, we talked about doing a joint letter from the mayors addressing all of that, and I was going to draft that. I did, and then the legislation shifted really quickly, and so then I revised it a little bit, and then it shifted again, and so I just wanted you to know I did not necessarily fall down on my job. We just never sent anything because I couldn't come up with a letter that was accurate long enough to send it to you all to. I was in communication with your attorneys, but anyway, you know how quickly they move, and we have to kind of stay on our toes when the legislature's in session. So maybe they'll be out soon. Okay, so congratulations for getting to this point. We are going to hopefully officially move into the formal process. Let me also caveat this by saying I am by no means an expert at this, just because I've been through it one time. It was a long time ago, and I've essentially just tried to outline what the process is in the statute. I have shared the document that we're going to send around to you guys in just a little bit to take with you with your attorneys, but I will always say, when in doubt, ask your counsel. I'm happy to help. I'm happy to advise where I can, but for your individual jurisdictions, you have your own attorneys and they can help guide you through this process. So when we were putting this together, we tried to come up with what is a reasonable time frame, understanding that there's going to be maybe some potential for some multiple meeting for some things, so we can do it a lot faster or we can do it a little more slowly. But regardless, once we get into it, we have about 6 months. Now, if you look at the statute, it's anticipated that it's drafted in such a way where, like you might have one municipality say, I need to make an amendment. And so they send a letter and the coordinating committees convene and it's addressed and you move on. So it's not necessarily set up as much for a wholesale redrafting because the plan has been dormant for a while like ours is. But because we've handled it the way that we have and we've already been working together and talking through all the potential issues and coming up with a plan, hopefully it will be smooth sailing from here. I don't know where wood is, but anyway, knock on it for me if you have it. So this should hopefully be the final advisory group meeting, and then we can initiate the process. So the way the amendment process is initiated, it's just like when the original growth plan was adopted. One of the mayors, and in this case, we've anticipated that the county mayor will do it because we're all in this together this time. We'll send a letter initiating the process. And what that does is just puts all the other municipalities or other members on notice that we're going to reconvene the coordinating committee. And so you need to start figuring out your coordinating committee person because there's 60 days once the process is initiated to actually convene the coordinating committee. And so what we have anticipated is that the letter will go out May 1st, and it's literally just a letter from the county mayor to the rest of the mayors saying, hey, we're initiating the process. Hopefully by then we'll already have a location and a date set up for the coordinating committee, and that letter will tell you and we'll kick it off. Again, just a reminder, the coordinating committee, just like this advisory group, is subject to the Public Notice, Open Meetings Act, all that good stuff. The county will continue to put those notices out, but if you want to also do that with your jurisdiction, totally up to you. But that's something we have to all keep in mind, that we have to make sure we're properly noticing not only the things that we're doing as a coordinating committee, but that you all are doing on behalf of your jurisdiction on those part of the processes. So, okay, so May 1st. It's kind of when we think we'll send the letter. Now, we need to talk about these timeframes as we're going through. Please just, holler. We've got the mics. But this is, again, just a potential timeline so that we can get through this. Okay, so from May 1st until mid-June, that's when we're going to start really gearing up for it. That's when you and your individual jurisdiction will have to figure out who's going to be your representative on the coordinating committee. When we get to the end of this, we've got the coordinating committee list again that we'll go through. But just a reminder, it's mainly, all the mayors, a representative from the chamber, Soil Conservation Service, that type of thing. The work that it's going to take as far as appointments are when you're talking about if a mayor chooses not to serve him or herself and they appoint a designee, that's going to take some legislative action. So we'll get to that in just toward the end of this. But between the time that it's initiated, within that 60 days before the meeting has to actually convene, that's when everybody has to figure out who's going and who's going to be this representative. And the representative is the one that is statutorily designated and will show up and be the active member on the coordinating committee, actually taking action on the coordinating committee. In the interim, we are also recommending that you be updating your jurisdiction, telling your legislative body, your planning commission, however you want to do it best in your community about the kickoff of this process, what it's going to look like, what it's going to entail, and going ahead and making sure that your legislative body specifically is up to speed with what's going on, not only with your process, but the overall process. Because again, ultimately, when we get to the end of this, all of the legislative bodies of every municipality and the county will have to sign off on it, or none of this will matter. Because again, I don't want to get to the negative part first, but if everyone doesn't sign off on it, then there are processes to address those differences, and there's some mediation pieces to it, but then if that doesn't work, then it gets where it's handed to us by a representative from the Secretary of State, and it's a whole thing. So we don't want to do that. So the more we can educate, the more we can involve, especially those entities, your legislative bodies that are actually taking action on this, the better. And we've kind of talked about that through this whole informal process. So, okay, so hopefully when we get all that done, then this summer, the coordinating committee will actually convene. And we'll know who the official voters are on the coordinating committee. Now, that's not to say that your, the planners, any other staff or important representatives from your entity can't come to those meetings. They're just not active members of the committee, and they won't be voting on the growth plan that's going to be submitted for approval. So we'll tie it down to the coordinating committee, but then those of you who aren't officially on it, if your entity wants you to come and attend these meetings, of course, they're open to the public. You're welcome to do so. I don't know that it would necessarily be appropriate for you to actively participate in the discussions, but you can certainly educate your member who is attending to actively. So again, that's the kind of thing that I want you to talk to your own counsel about how to handle, but we also want to make sure we're staying within the bounds of the statute so that if we're ever challenged, that our actions and our processes are held up in court. Because you can challenge these growth plans after they're formally adopted. So again, we have the 6-month clock. I'm setting a 6-month clock at this initiation meeting with the coordinating committee because we will start talking about presentations. There's some language in there that can suggest that it's when you get that First Amendment presentation. But to be safe, our 6-month clock is going to start here, knowing that we've already done a lot of the groundwork. We've done a lot of the hard parts. And so surely we can get to this pretty quickly. So then the next step is now that we're officially in the process, I know that a lot of you have already done a lot of public outreach, had some public hearings, but the statute says you have to have 2 before you can formally present your amendment to the coordinating committee. So what we've kind of recommended through this is until we're officially in the process, your public outreach that you've done, let's not call that the official 2 public hearings, because we want to make sure we're staying within the bounds of the statute in the event we're ever challenged, which hopefully we won't. But you have to have 2 public hearings. It's up to you whether you have it at both of them, at your legislative body, at your planning commission, just wherever you want to have it. As long as you have the proper public notice, 15 days in a newspaper of circulation, all that good stuff. If you want to put notifications on your website, if you want to stick flyers up in the library, whatever you want to do, just meet the minimum 1. They don't have to be at a certain time of day, a certain night. They can be one night after the other, however you want to do it. We just need to get those done. We need to get those comments so that when you are ready to present your formal amendment to the growth plan to the coordinating committee, you have accomplished that. But also, you've gotten the public comment that you need so that you as an entity are comfortable when you present your amendment that that's what your legislative body and your citizens are in support of. So, I mean, obviously, that's the point. The county will have to do that as well for the planned growth areas and the rural areas before an amendment is presented from the county side. So all of the jurisdictions that are participating want to do that. Again, we're anticipating that around July, August. And then in August, get back together officially, the coordinating committee, after everyone's done their public hearings, and start formally hearing the amendments. Again, this should be what we've already heard and been hearing all this time, but unless you have a tweak or 2 from your public hearings, which hopefully you won't because you've already heard your citizen comments, but then you'll come in and you'll make your official presentation of this is the amendment that Williamson County would like to see on the PGAs. This is the amendment that Thompson Station would like to see in the UGBs. And you'll make those formal presentations to the coordinating committee. If that all happens in one meeting, fantastic, we'll move along. If we need more than one, then that's kind of why some of these dates are a little, loose. Okay, so you'll make your presentation, and then the coordinating committee will have to have kind of discussions about what that plan, the official growth plan, is going to look like. So the coordinating committee will have discussions. So here are the amendments, and we can have multiple meetings. I guess it just is going to depend on how those go. It's hard to predict, but hopefully it'll be a well-oiled machine, right? That's how it's going to be. Wait, did somebody chuckle? Did I hear somebody chuckle? No, I didn't. No, it's going to be a well-oiled machine. That's the plan. That's the plan. So after the coordinating committee gathers together and determines that they have a formal official growth plan that they would like to present to the world, then the coordinating committee also has to have public hearings. 2, just like the jurisdictions did. And I'm obligating the county here, but because we've kind of been driving the bus as far as the public meetings and setting things up, that kind of thing, the public notices, I'm sure the county's happy to continue to do that. You all advertise them on your sites as well. We want as much, word out there, but we have to have the 15 days notice in the paper and all that good stuff. So the coordinating committee will have to have 2 public hearings, and then the coordinating committee will get back together and discuss that public comment that the coordinating committee received, and if there needed to be any tweaks or changes. Because at this point, frankly, the cities and the county have released your amendments and your plan to the coordinating committee. And it's up to the coordinating committee to put that growth plan together, map, content, everything. Finally put it together. You put it together, put it out for public comment, now you're coming back and you're landing on it, okay? So after the coordinating committee does that, at some point, the coordinating committee will take an official vote and say, this is our growth plan. And then you send it out to the municipalities in the county for the legislative bodies to take action on it. At that point, the 6-month clock stops because we've worked through the amendment process, and a different clock starts. Oops, not too far. So once the coordinating committee takes action, we have an official growth plan, maps, content, everything. It's shipped out to the municipalities, formally sent out. Then the municipalities and the counties, legislative bodies, have 120 days to take action on it. If you sit on it at your jurisdiction for 121 days, the coordinating committee can assume it's automatically approved and you're good and they're going to move on. So if you are taking action at the legislative body and you're going to approve it, which I hope that you do, then you would send your ordinance or resolution or whatever formal action that you took confirming acceptance of and approving of that growth plan that was transmitted to you by the coordinating committee. Send it back to the coordinating committee so we have a record of all of that. Now, stepping off to the negative side, which I hope we don't veer into, but if your legislative body rejects the official growth plan, you have to say why. And you have to transmit that back to the coordinating committee. So let's just briefly talk about that. The coordinating committee gets something back from one of the municipalities saying we reject the growth plan, we don't like A, B, and C. The coordinating committee reconvenes and looks at that. If the coordinating committee then makes a minor change in response to that, or a major change, or whatever it is, then that growth plan, since it's now been revised and is the new official growth plan of the coordinating committee, goes back out to everybody else. So even if everybody but one adopted the first one, now we got a new one, and we're gonna all do it again. If the coordinating committee gets those comments and they were like, yeah, we don't, we're good, then they send it back out without the change. If that entity rejects it again, that's when we get into the hairy stuff. The entity rejects it again for the same or new or additional reasons. At some point, that entity or another can declare what's called an impasse. And that's not up here. I just didn't write it down. It's in the statute. You can declare an impasse. You ask the Secretary of State to appoint a panel, either a panel or a single. When they did it the first time, it was an administrative law judge. And then you all go up there and we all present all our stuff to this either panel or this ALJ, and they help us try and mediate it out. And whatever results from that goes to the municipalities and the county's legislative bodies to adopt. If that breaks down, it goes to a new panel of mediators or an ALJ, and they just write one for us. And we all get to pay for all of this process. And at that point, the ALJ, the administrative law judge, or the panel can even hire some of their own experts to kind of come in and look at stuff. So let's not do that if we can help it. That's very time consuming and sounds like it'll be expensive. So let's go back to the perfect happy scenario where we have a growth plan and it's fantastic and everybody loves it and we send it out to the legislative bodies and we all hold hands and sing Kumbaya. Then it comes back in with all the resolutions and the ordinances adopting that growth plan, and it is officially transmitted to the LGPAC, Local Government Planning Advisory Committee. The LGPAC sees that everybody signed off on it and it's fantastic and everybody in Williamson County is happy and they sign off on it. They send it back to the county mayor who registers it for free at the Register of Deeds office. They can't charge you to do this. And then it becomes the official growth plan in Williamson County. Now, stepping back to the negative again, if someone wants to challenge it, a resident or whatever, they can do so. They have 60 days from the official approval at the LGPAC. It's treated kind of like when you challenge a planning commission decision. So it's filed in Chancery Court down here, kind of like a petition for cert. I don't know that it necessarily calls it that, but it's the same kind of thing. All the stuff that the coordinating committee looked at and the municipalities in the county looked at in adopting it would be reviewed by a Chancery Court de novo. So again, that's not gonna happen. We're not gonna go there, but that's a thing. So we wanna make sure that our processes are followed, that we stick within the bounds of the statute, and everybody's happy so that if there is a challenge, we know we've followed and done everything that we could to make the growth plan that this entire community adopts and is proud of is upheld. So that's a lot. I know I just said a lot. So are there any questions that I can try and ask, or if not, point you to your attorneys to answer?
I've got one.
Yes.
I'd like to share the map, the draft map with our board. Do you have a timetable for sharing that with this group? As opposed to the plan, just give them a preliminary look before the plan.
Yeah, yes. I mean, all the information that we've been sharing and that we've been using here through this process.
I think there was a tweak, though. That's what I was asking.
Right.
Yeah.
that
Let me respond to that.
Finalize.
We have that literally at about like 99%. So the issue that we talked about last time has been resolved. What we've done next is to send those maps back out to the jurisdictions, the planning staffs, in a GIS format. Because when you look at how different communities, there are a couple of really small little bug kinds of things that you can't even see from a countywide perspective. None of those are issues that anybody's disagreeing with. We're just trying to get those finalized. So we're really close. I think we've got 1 or 2 more jurisdictions that are still looking at theirs. But we're really close to having that final map. Now, when you see it and you look at what you've been seeing in the PowerPoint, it's going to look the same to you, other than the Thompson Station Spring Hill thing that was resolved. But yes, we can get that out to you pretty quickly. And while I'm on that, I think where you're going with that is really right-minded. I think Christy has made clear that there are certain procedures that come out if there are things that occur during the legislative approval process that you really don't want to go to if you can avoid it. We can't, you can't, no one can commit to what legislative bodies are going to do, but the extent to which you can preview those things and talk to people and try to, frankly, avoid surprises at the end, which I think is what you're getting at, is great.
Thank you for this. It's exciting. I'm glad to see it moving forward. Thanks for laying it all out. On one of your slides, I think like 3 or 4 slides ago, you mentioned the cities and the county to hold public hearings in July and August. If a change is desired through those public hearings, maybe there's a refinement that citizens are requesting and the board supportive of that. It sounds like there's an opportunity to make some changes at that point before it's officially presented to the coordinating committee. Is that correct?
That's when you as a jurisdiction will make your determination on what your amendment to the growth plan is going to look like. So if you need to make tweaks because there's something that you've learned in that public hearing process that you haven't heard before, then what you present formally after that to the coordinating committee is the amendment that the City of Franklin is presenting to the growth plan. Now, because we've been through this process, it might be helpful to the coordinating committee to understand what the differences are. But to answer your question, yes, what we've gone through is an informal process so that we have time to plan and discuss and hear public comment. But what you present to the committee is your official amendment.
And that would occur, Christy, at the August coordinating committee meeting, right? So if you have those public hearings, and it wouldn't be surprising if you come in with some tweaks that you want to have to it. That's what we get presented. And then again, as Christy said, if the coordinating committee can resolve it that day, that's great. If they need to have another meeting to work through it, then we'll do that.
Any other questions? You want to talk about the committee itself? Okay. So the coordinating committee, and again, we're going to give you all of this handout, not only this that I wrote, but also the actual statutory thing, because I tried to word it where it sounded a little more normal. But this is the statutory made-up coordinating committee. This is who will officially meet. This is who will actually take action, deliberate, send out a growth plan. So it's anticipated that the mayor of each municipality and the county is the member from that entity. However, if the mayor cannot serve, then the mayor will need to appoint a designee. Now, this is not somebody that just comes when they're sick one day. This is someone that comes in lieu of the mayor. If the mayor chooses not to serve in himself or herself, then the legislative body has to approve that designee appointment. That's really the only time the legislative body has a role in this, except when it's time to adopt the plan. So you have the mayor from each municipality in the county or his or her designee, excuse me. Then you have one member from a municipally owned utility system. Now, when we did this advisory group process late 2021, we first started it, we gathered information, me and Mike gathered information from some of the utilities. It's based on the number of customers inside the county, whether the utility is located in the county or not. So there's the municipally owned utility and the non-municipally owned utility. We asked Atmos, we asked Middle Tennessee Electric, we got some numbers from Franklin's Water and Sewer Department, some other entities. Bottom line is when we did this research in 2021, it was Middle Tennessee Electric as the non-municipally owned utility and the City of Franklin's Water and Sewer Department as the municipally owned utility based on the number of customers. Y'all are going to have to tell me if you think that has changed significantly since then. I don't know that it has, but if it has, somebody give me a heads up so we can run that down. But if I don't hear from you, I will presume it is the same thing. Those members are appointed by their governing board, whatever that looks like. Whoever Middle Tennessee Electric says needs to take action so that someone can come. I mean, I assume Chuck's going to keep coming. He's not here today. Eric, I believe you were here on behalf of the City of Franklin. Whatever the governing board is of that utility, whether it's BOMA, whether it's their own, committee, that's on y'all. You just need to have whatever action to take to appoint someone to represent that municipally owned utility. Yes.
Real quick question on that. Before this informal process started, our board actually acted to appoint people in that spot as well as the two other representatives. Does that still stand, or do we need to refresh that, or what's your opinion on that?
I think the opinion that I've kind of had throughout this is once the letters drop, let's just do it all. Okay. Let's do it all after that, because now we know we're in the official process, so it would be essential of confirmation. I just think that will be cleaner, and we can clear up any potential questions about it. The Soil Conservation District, if it has a board, they will take action to appoint someone. Mr. Ring has been appointed, so if you could get them to just rubber stamp you again, keep coming back, that'd be fantastic. The Local Education Agency, Jason, you've been here, it's the largest, so you would need the board to sign off on you once again and send you back.
A second time.
Yes, after the official process is started, that way we have the documentation that you were officially appointed after we were in the statutory process. That would be the cleanest. The largest chamber, I don't think Kel is here. So we'll follow up with the chamber and make sure that they take action to appoint someone. And then on top of that, the county mayor has two members that he can appoint, and the mayor of the largest municipality, which Mayor Moore had appointed 2 members to attend. That doesn't require legislative action based on my reading of the statute and the AG opinions that I've read. So it's just appointments by the mayor. It's the only documentation the parameters are that it has to be broad representation of environmental, construction, and homeowner interests. That's what those 2 members should come in here with background representation for. So those are essentially your official growth plan coordinating committee. So after we drop the letter May 1st, take whatever actions at your places to get those formally appointed, designated, denoted, whatever, so we have a record that it was done, so that when the coordinating committee is officially convened, that the people that are sitting in the chairs on your entities or your municipalities or the county's behalf have the authority to not only be here, but to take action according to the statute. And again, I have all of this in a handout that we will provide you, not only this, but also with the actual language from the statute. I will again point you to your councils if you have any questions. They know this as well as I do. I just happen to be the one standing up here because I got to do it the first time. That was fun. All right. Are there any other questions about this part?
Christy, I think it's clear, but just so that folks can be thinking about that appointments, it's from like May 1st to middle of June. That's the window within which all the appointments need to be confirmed, right?
Yes.
Okay.
I saw your hand.
So, ignore your mics. This is more directed to Franklin, I think. Eric, your legal counsel. Will these timeframes need to be worked on because of an election? I think that's the only election we still have in this year. Or no, Brentwood.
Well, we have ours, but we'll have a new mayor. But that'll be in May, so that shouldn't be a problem.
So May, we will need to reach out to your new mayor. And then Franklin has an election in the fall. I'm looking for that'd be October.
End of October.
They are. Now, I think all the other cities, they don't have any more elections this year. Is that it?
We just finished.
Huh?
We just finished.
Spring Hill just finished.
Yeah, right.
Yes, sir.
Fairview, we did their last year. station, though, so everybody's fine. Just want to be sure we didn't get put in that box midway in it. Thanks.
Christy, did you have anything else?
Not unless anyone has questions.
Okay, so no questions with regard to what Christy just went through? All right, well, here's where we are, folks. So you, oh, yes.
Hey, just a quick question, I guess, on the process, just for the municipalities. When we have our public hearings, our two required, we're looking at July and August. Does our legislative body need to vote to send the plan, our plan, to the coordinating committee, or is that just kind of what we have and we're not voting till we get the whole plan back from the coordinating committee, that first ratification?
So I'm going to give you the typical lawyer answer, which you should appreciate. It's up to you. The statute doesn't really say that you have to take action. It doesn't not say it, and I didn't see anything in the AG opinion. So some entities may want their legislative bodies to sign off on it before it becomes an official amendment. I've seen it done both ways, but I don't, and y'all tell me if you see something. I don't see anything that says you have to take that action.
Yeah, I didn't see that when I was looking, and that just kind of seemed like a gap there, and I didn't know if we wanted to all do the same thing. We have different jurisdictions, but more for consistency, or just we're going to figure it out on our own.
I think that the statute is purposefully vague so that entities can handle it the way they normally would handle it. Maybe we all should kind of convene and decide if that's what we want to do, but did you have something? I don't know if it's on.
I was just going to say that regardless of whether the legislative body approves it before it goes to the coordinating committee, even if we don't do that, it's a good idea for the legislative bodies to be informed throughout the process so that whether they take action or not ahead of time, they're aware of what is being presented on behalf of the jurisdiction.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. And from my perspective, from a non-legal perspective, I think the judgment should involve the question of whether or not you think it would be helpful to essentially have that read before it comes back. The idea that if your elected officials vote to approve it being sent to the coordinating committee, then I would think it's logical that there's less likelihood than it would when it gets back to them for the final adoption that there would be a different kind of an opinion. So I think it's a judgment call that you all need to make. But again, considering that all of your jurisdictions are going to have to approve the same thing at the end of this process, the more you can do to, identify any issues that the coordinating committee needs to know, because while there are procedures set up for this eventuality, when this goes around to the final approvals by the jurisdictions, I think we all really hope that that there's no surprises there and that those all happen. Pam.
So one of the things that we have talked about in here, and I think Thompson Station and Mrs. Spring Hill have talked about, is doing the intergovernmental agreements to not annex outside of our UGB and to revisit this every 5 years.
Right.
Where in this process does that get pushed?
Yeah, that's an excellent question, and I'm glad you raised that because we should think about that as a group. So what Pam's referring to is, you will recall that in addition to the lines on the map, we've identified some implementation strategies, and a couple of those we think ought to be kind of low-hanging fruit, in the sense that one of the things we've said, and you've all heard many times and you've nodded your heads to, is the idea that as part of this process, we should not only have the maps, but we should have agreement that we intend not to annex outside of those growth boundaries. I've said it before. It's like, if we can't agree to that, then why are we here? I mean, that's the whole reason to have growth boundaries, is to create predictability about where those would occur. And then the other thing that we've talked about is the idea that let's not wait 20 years to revisit this again. Let's commit that in 5 years, we're going to come back, that there will be a revisit of that. And I think that was in the thinking of a lot of the jurisdictions when they put the lines on the map. We don't necessarily have to have 20-year certainty here. We know we're going to come back in 5 years and update this. And then I'll remind you that the third piece of this, which I think is important, is the idea that it's not just let's come back and revisit this in 5 years. Let's have ongoing planning occurring. In other words, a group that looks maybe like this should meet on maybe a quarterly basis, not necessarily to revisit the growth boundaries, but to be a regional planning forum for discussion. Not a formal entity, it's just a forum where communications can be shared. I've sensed that you all gotten to know each other through this process, and that there are some benefits from that. There are certain things that have been talked about in terms of regional transportation issues and school siting planning issues. So those three things, agreement not to annex, agreement to revisit this in 5 years, and then an ongoing kind of planning forum, are what we're talking about. It's a long way to get to answering the question. So the question then is, assuming that you try to pursue those through some sort of an intergovernmental agreement, something that is a little bit more formal than just putting it in the plan, then the question is, when do we do that? So there's two ways to think about it. One is, let's get through this process and then come back. The other is, hey, let's get some momentum going and try to start working on those intergovernmental agreements so that at about the same time that this plan gets adopted, that you'd be entering into those intergovernmental agreements. I think that's a good public declaration, if you will, of how serious you are about making this plan work. I'm just a facilitator, but I think there's let's get the momentum going. Let's not spread this out over time. Let's just get these. And if you all are ready, I don't think the drafting of those intergovernmental agreements is all that challenging a thing. It's a pretty simple legal document. We've talked about those 3 points, and I think everybody's been in agreement on it. Why not go ahead and try to get those moving at the same time that we're going through this process?
Spoken like a real non-lawyer, saying it's going to be a simple document.
Maybe we should let Greg draft the first version.
Hey, you know what? It's almost drafted. I mean, it's no, seriously, in the sense of the content, what we're agreeing to. Now, all that legalese stuff you guys have to put in.
I would think that we are best served by trying to get the interlocal done as we're going through the 6-month window. I think that some of the municipalities have informally approved where we are conditioned on that agreement. So I think we need to get there, and I'm going to I don't know how to work these things. I guess I'm going to make a suggestion that potentially the lawyers get together first and try to come up with a skeleton and the key issues that we have to take back to our respective jurisdictions. We can try to schedule that over the next month or two and get that going, and then kind of figure out what we're going to be fighting about, or if we're going to be fighting about anything. Hopefully we aren't, but we've got another piece to this beyond the concept of what we want to agree on, and the lawyers are all going to, I think, nod their head. We've also got to have an enforcement piece. So that's going to be, to me, the creative portion that the lawyers are going to have to deal with, and then bring it back. Then if we want to have a second meeting with representatives of our client as well to hear what we're talking about, that's fine too, but I think a lawyer's first meeting would be a good idea.
See, leave it to a lawyer to make it complicated, right, Jeff? Okay, I heard a yes. I see some heads nodding, up and down nodding. Is that the consensus of the group?
Yeah.
All right, go. All right, good deal. All right, anything else before we start to wrap this up?
How many other counties have done this and done it in a manner like we're doing across the state?
I just know of, Mike, remind me of which county it was. It's not far from here. Montgomery County. I know went through this within the past couple of years. Theirs was a little bit different. They have a different county planning function, and I think the county planners really led it.
Other municipalities to deal with.
Right. They don't have all the municipalities. So they've done it, but I don't know if anybody knows whether or not anybody's done it this way or not.
No, I mean, I think Tasser has some stats on it. Most of them, many of them it's probably a better word, have already been amended. They didn't wait as long as we did. And I think multiple times, because sometimes a jurisdiction will come in and only one of them will have an amendment and the rest of them will either sign off or if it just affects. They've tinkered with the statute so many times. Most have not waited this long if they have amended their growth plans, but most do not have as many municipalities in the county. It might be just one or two. So it's slightly less complicated than what we've done. But TASER keeps all that stats on their website too, since they're charged with following up on the implementation of the original 1101 law.
All right, so you are not an official decision-making body, so there's no final decision that's coming out of this. We're not planning to vote here, but I do want to try to get some sense, again, head nodding, thumbs up, kind of thing. You know where this process is going to go from here. I said at the beginning, we are envisioning this to be the last advisory group. So my question to you is, are we there? Are we there? Yes.
I want to circle back a little bit. Very encouraging that we've got somebody going to start working on the interlocal agreement. What concerns me is I didn't hear a date or a schedule of when we're going to come back, so we can put some placeholders in our calendars to make sure that we do our part, providing feedback. And I suspect each of the interlocal agreements will, while they'll be much the same, there'll be tweaks to it that are unique to each.
Well, remember, that's a good question, and that's a fair question, and maybe we need a little bit of time with the attorneys to talk and try to figure that out. But remember, and I am looking to the attorneys here, we might be talking about several different kinds of intergovernmental agreements. So in other words, there might be a kind of master intergovernmental agreement that deals with these high-level 5-year update, not annexation kinds of things that would be the same that everybody would sign into. Whereas there are other things, in particular, you remember the one that is really the most substantive issue to try to figure out is these interim policies, right? What happens if somebody wants to develop within a growth boundary, but the municipality is not ready for it from a timing perspective? From a zoning, county zoning, municipal service, alternative sewer systems, all those things that have to be figured out. That's where I could see these intergovernmental agreements getting more complicated, that, what's entered into between community A and the county is different than community B and the county, or community A and community B. Those are the ones that I think get complicated. I think these three that we're talking about now, the 5-year update, the no annexation outside, and the continuation of some sort of planning forum function, I don't know why those couldn't be a single agreement that everybody signs onto. Okay. But your fair question still is, what is the timing on those so that you can start to be planning yours? Eric, did you want to say something?
I was going to say the exact same thing. I think a base interlocal that we all share makes a lot of sense. And then if there's needs for additional ones or topic-based ones, those can come down the line. But let's do the base. And my thought was just have it follow this process. Maybe that's an additional bullet along the way. And it starts in June, it evolves in August, and in October it needs to be done. As we're getting ready to vote on the actual plan update, we are also have a companion, which is this base interlocal. So I don't know what exactly that needs to look like, but as we start to talk about the amendments, we ought to be talking about that base interlocal that has those kind of 3 or 4 guiding elements to it.
Let me drill down deeper into that and just see if there's consensus that the way I hear you saying that is literally at the same time that you're adopting the growth plan, that you're approving the intergovernmental agreements. In other words, I think, Jeff, what you said, which is important, is some of these communities might see those as being mutually dependent upon each other. We're not going to do this if we don't have this. So potentially on the same agenda. Is that okay? All right. Good. I love up and down head nodding. Okay, so speaking of up and down head nodding, are we there in terms of shifting out of the advisory group into this formal process as it's been outlined? Thumbs up? Nobody's bound to this. You're not making commitments on behalf of your jurisdictions. You can't do that here, but for this group. Okay, so man, that was easy, wasn't it? Seriously, I think you should all just pause. I think there's a little bit of reflection here that we should do. All the meetings that you've come to, all the work of the planners group, all the behind the scenes work with the attorneys working with each other. You know, this is really quite an accomplishment. Now, I realize, you know, we're only part of the way through this. We still have to go through the formal process. But this part of it, when we started this advisor group process, I think it's remarkable when you look at the jurisdictions and how you were able to come to agreement. A bump in the road here and there, you worked through it, you stuck with it, and here we all are with everybody nodding their head. So I just want to thank you for the opportunity to be involved in this. It's been immensely rewarding for me and just a fascinating process. So looking forward to continuing with that. And with that, Mayor Anderson, do you want to make any closing comments?
Well, first of all, thank you, Greg, for kind of driving us through this process. It's a very difficult process that any county is interesting. In short, I think I heard the lawyers say we're the first one to do it this way. So it's an accomplishment to all of you that have given up your time, and I know there have been a few changes. Thank you for being here in a timely manner. It's great to see says leaving. If you have not seen the Tennessee Comptroller's article, I just sent it to Eric and a few others sitting around the room. It says population top 7 million for the first time in the state of Tennessee. It's got a county by county listing. We now have a population of 7,051,000 people. The Tennessee counties with the top that were in the top 100 of the United States for growth. 43 was number Rutherford County with 19,000 people. Knox County with 15,593. Montgomery County, and then Williamson County. We were the 75th fastest growing county in the state of 13,000 people since in the country since 2020. So it's, as Jeff pointed out to me, I'm not sure, I guess that's the lawyer in him, we are now more populated state. We surpassed Massachusetts. So anybody likes to know those tidbits, Jeff can probably answer that for you. So it is appropriate that we are doing this at this time. I think it will pay off for us in the next 5 years. It's a tool we're using for 10 and 20 and 25 years out when many of us will know it will not be longer serving in our roles. Again, thank you, appreciate it. Any final remarks, comments, questions? Greg, again, thank you for coming down every single time. You all probably wouldn't know this, but Greg's been doing this for us since 1988. Oh, Bob? Nice. Sounds about right. 1986, we were not incorporated. I believe that's right. That's right. I think he was. Anything else? Thank you all.